It was a drama that gripped the Connecticut State Capitol 20 years ago, involving high hopes but then deep disappointment. The New England Patriots were going to relocate to Hartford, but then they didn't.
Author Jeff Benedict is with us this morning. He was a guest on this program years ago as an opponent of casino expansion. Since then, he's been turning out tremendous best-selling books. His newest is Dynasty, about the New England Patriots.
Mr. Benedict, thank you so much for joining us. It is conventional wisdom that people in Connecticut assume Robert Kraft never really intended to bring the team to Connecticut, that we were just being used as leverage with Massachusetts, hoping Massachusetts would step up. But you say that's not quite the case.
That's actually what I thought when I started this book. It's because that's been the story that's been told for over 20 years. But that's not the story. It's not, at least not the whole story. The reality is that the Krafts were going to bring the team to New England. They went as far as to sign a legal binding contract with the state of Connecticut. Hundreds of millions of dollars were appropriated by the state, and the team actually notified season ticket holders throughout New England that their season tickets would be honored in Hartford. They took out full-page ads in the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald. You don't do those things for leverage. You do those things because you're moving. And if it weren't for some really last-minute wrangling by the NFL and some fallout with Governor Rowland, they would be in Hartford today.
You have a marvelous chapter called Dear John about their odyssey in Connecticut. Did the state's negotiators say no to anything that Robert Kraft asked for?
They really didn't say no to anything he asked for, except at the end, when it was clear that the state of Connecticut was not going to be able to make the deadlines that were in the contract, and there were environmental issues with the ground on which the stadium was going to be built. That was the first time that the governor said no. What he said no to was Kraft wanted extensions in the contract. In other words, he wanted more time before using the nuclear option to withdraw. And the governor wouldn't give him that, and so he withdrew.
The Patriots run a notoriously tight-lipped operation. How did you get your information?
From inside the organization. I mean, I spent over 2 years inside the organization with the team, but I spent a lot of time building relationships that enabled me to do that. And I started with ownership, with Robert Kraft. And I actually started Doobie by writing him a letter from my home in Connecticut to the stadium. And I was really surprised a few months later when he wrote me back. And that, I mean, it sounds kind of old-fashioned, but he is old-fashioned in an interesting way, and I am as well. That was the beginning of our correspondence, and of course it evolved from there. And eventually I approached Coach Belichick and Tom Brady and many of the other key players and people in the organization, but a lot of it was just building relationships of trust and getting to the point where people were comfortable to talk.
You know, your book really is about so much more than just football or professional football. Does Robert Kraft still marvel every now and then that it was the Jacksons' 1984 victory tour that opened the door for him to buy the New England Patriots?
It's funny, we were talking about that recently. There are so many moments like that. You think Michael Jackson actually had a role in Robert Kraft being able to buy the team. And there's so many strange things that happened along the way that enabled this to happen. And you're right, it is much more than a football story. It's really a story about family and relationships that enabled this dynasty to be built.
How do you do a book tour in the age of COVID? You've written so many great books, and I have to mention your Tiger Woods biography because it was riveting. But I'm sure this experience has been completely different. than when you published those other books.
It has been different in every way. Starting with when this book came out in September, I couldn't do in-person book signings or go to bookstores or do speeches or the kinds of things you normally do to promote a book. Made it really difficult. We were doing virtual book events, which I'm not a big fan of. It's not much different than what we're doing right now. It's me somewhere else talking to readers who are at home watching on a computer or a television screen. But recently, I've started doing book events in person in the 6 New England states. I thought it was, look, this is a book about a team that's played in inclement weather, in the cold, in the snow. And I thought it would be a good idea to go around to stores and instead of being inside like we normally are, to be outside and enable readers to come, be socially distanced, wear a mask, meet the author, get a book, and at the same time help bookstores.
Well, that's great. And we're going to put on our Facebook page some of your locations where people can go to your book signings. But Jeff Benedict, thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. The book, once again, is called Dynasty, and you'll find it at your favorite independent bookstore. When Face the State returns, what are some great political books, new and classic, that you might want to give to family and friends?
Roxanne Cody of R.J. Julia Bookstores will join us with her list when we come back.